Hi, this is Shane Bryan from the Bad Boys Podcast. While the Bad Boys Podcast is on a break, I decided to launch a brand new show featuring interviews with some amazing guests that we've had, as well as new interviews that I've done on my radio show on LAFM. I've had so many interviews that I've done and so many more planned now. The show is called A Long Way to the Top, and if you'd like to hear more, then search for Long Way to the Top on the platform that you're listening to right now. Enjoy this special Bad Boys presentation of Long Way to the Top. This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. In the words of the immortal AC/DC, it is harder than it looks. These interviews will give you a glimpse into the lives of the artists that we've sung along with, danced and rocked out to. Some go deep into their past and others celebrate their recent releases. But all of them show that regardless of who you are, it's always a long way to the top. He has been described as a poet, a rebel, a committed lover of celluloid. Hugh Cornwell was the lead singer and key songwriter for the Stranglers, and his song Golden Brown is a songwriting masterclass in itself, with lyrics that have meanings upon meanings. With a solo album called Moments of Madness, he has come out of the wilderness with a tour around Australia. Hugh Cornwell joins me on today's episode of Long Way to the Top. Hugh, welcome to the show.
Hello, Shane. Thank you very much. It's very nice that we could hook up for this.
Yeah, look, fantastic career that you have had. And, obviously this is Long Way to the Top. We'd love to sort of go back into your background as well. But before we do that, new album, or it's not actually that new now, it's been out for a couple of years, but Moments of Madness. What a fantastic album.
One year.
And still touring it around. And what's the reception been like?
Very good. I'm frankly very surprised by it because to me it's just the next album, you know, and hopefully they're improving, and that's why I keep doing it to try and make the new one better than the last one. And you always learn something from recording an album, which you then take on in your brain until you start the next one, and then you put into practice all the things you learned from the one before. So it's a constant process of constant education. Yeah. And I was very surprised by this one. I seem to be on the right track. You know, if I'd have got 0 points out of 5, I might be thinking, well, I'm going in the wrong direction. But it was the other way around. So I'm very happy.
It harkens back to the days of the Stranglers, and in fact, there's even a review by one of the magazines that have said that it's almost like what the Stranglers should be like. It's like the ex-Strangler that hasn't yet gone soft.
Well, I've heard a couple of things in the last few days to that effect, like, you know, it sounds like a Stranglers album, and I'd never heard that before, and I'm frankly quite shocked because it wasn't intentional. But I guess if you've got the same songwriter, the same voice, and the same guitar playing, then that only leaves bass, drums, and I don't carry keyboards anyway, so it's only two things that are different from the original band. So. It's a sort of I was shocked when I first heard it, but thinking about it, I can understand why people have said that.
I mean, the comment that really stood out to me the most was when it said it's the ex-Strangler that has not yet gone soft. Do you feel that as a band, the Stranglers did go soft?
Well, I don't make a habit of listening. I deliberately have avoided listening to anything they've done since I left.
No, but before you left, though, do you feel like there was a softening?
Oh, when I left, yeah. I mean, I don't know about softened. I'd just grown out of it. You know, It was I felt that it was too limiting to what I wanted to do, and it was getting a bit dull, I have to say. Rather than going soft, it was just getting dull.
Yeah,
you know, and there's nothing worse than being bored.
Yeah,
and you know, we went into every time we went into the studio, it was like painting by numbers. It was really boring.
Yeah.
And when we went on tour, as we met up and did the shows, and then I didn't know anything about the lives that the others were carrying on with. And you know, it's all got a bit dull and formulaic. So so I don't know about going soft, but that's more what it was like.
And I mean, every album that you've done in your solo career, you seem to have a different sound. I mean, it's something that you've managed to achieve on every album. And if you said, describe Hugh Cornwell's sound, I would say punk, post-punk, pop, indie pop, spoken word, garage rock. I mean, and all of these answers would be correct.
Well, it's not intentional. You know, as I said, I mean, when I first left the band, my head was spinning. I just didn't know who I was, where I was, what I should be sounding like. I didn't even play guitar for the first 2 years. I mean,
Right.
It took Laurie Latham, the producer of Oral Sculpture, who I worked with on 2 solo albums. It took him to convince me. He said, "I'm not producing this album, Hugh, if you don't play guitar." And I was really surprised when he said that, but it made me pick it up again. So my head was spinning. I really didn't know. I'd been in it for so long and been branded by that brand, you know, for so long. And I had been so sure of my role in that lineup that it took a while to, you know, it took years to readjust and start getting my own sound together, you know, and hey ho. Now people are saying, "Oh, it sounds like the Stranglers." So what can I do, Shane?
There's nothing you can do. Look, let's go back to those to the early days. You know, and it was very much cutting edge punk that you were putting out. Is that, if there was a favorite period in your career, would it be those punk days?
I loved the beginnings, you know, because it was all new to us and it was refreshing, and we were fresh, and we lived with each other, and we lived out of each other's pockets. We were all best mates, and it reflects itself in what you produce. And also, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but the Stranglers, when they first started, was a 3-piece. It was a power trio.
Yeah.
Just like I have now, it's bass guitar and drums. But you see, I couldn't play guitar that well. I can't play that much better now, but I'm a little bit better. But I couldn't play any sort of lead guitar work at all then. And so it was obvious that we needed some sort of a lead instrument to take the lead. So a lot of those early songs from the first 2 albums were actually written as a power trio. And so those songs translate very well now when I pick them up and play them.
Yeah.
Like Hanging Around sounds great, and London Ladies sounds great, and Grip sounds great, because they weren't written with keyboards in mind, you know. And when Dave came in, he embellished those songs that were basically already written. Apart from, I mean, Down in the Sewer, I think, was one that he contributed a lot to because of his skill as a keyboard player. But most of the others were down and out rock songs, you know, rock and roll songs, and that's the period. I think that's my favorite period, because it was more what I was about. Let's put it that way.
Now, when you reached that period where, you know, with Golden Brown, I mean, that was a massive departure from your previous sound. Was it an intentional change?
Well, no, it was just a one-off song. I mean, the album it appears on, what was it, La Folie, I think.
La Folie, yeah.
Yeah. If you look at the rest of the album, it's not like anything else, not only on any other album, but it's not like anything else on that album even. And the reason is because it was Dave Greenfield's musical expertise. You know, he wrote the music entirely to that song, and I provided the top line and the melody, and I arranged it for him. So that's why it was so different from anything else, and that's what I loved about it. You know, I thought it was I thought it was very dangerous for us to do something so different, and that's what attracted me to it.
I was talking with Steve Kilby from the church, and he said that Unguarded Moment, which is possibly their greatest song, he hates. He wishes he'd never written it. How do you feel about Golden Brown?
No, I don't feel like that at all. I mean, I'm very proud of having taken part in writing it. I mean, the PRS, have you heard of the PRS, Performing Rights Society, a worldwide known organisation to protect writers of songs and music in general? They put together a book called 100 Years in Verse about 10 years ago.
Right.
And they got in touch with me to ask if I would agree to the lyrics to Golden Brown going in as the song of 1982. I think that was the year.
Yeah.
And I was stunned, to be selected, in a book that's got lyrics by Jerome Kern, and all these amazing writers, Sami Khan maybe, and all these fabulous writers from the century, and to be put in that kind of company, I was flabbergasted, and of course I agreed immediately, and I've got a copy of it in my loo, by the way.
Where all good books go.
It's definitely a loo read. Not to be disparaging about it, but it's definitely a loo read. Yeah. Not a loo read, but a read in the loo. I'm very proud. I know pride is a vice, but I'm very proud of that song and what it means to so many people around the world. Yeah.
I mean, and you should be, because it's a song that, as I said in the intro, it's become a masterclass in itself. There's this underlying, you kind of think it's about a girl, but then it's not, and there's this underlying theme, which I think you have described as being about heroin. And yet it's become a song that is become so acceptable. It's a standard on radio.
But it was a love song as well. I mean, it was about a particular girl that I was in a relationship with, a clandestine one, I must say.
Yeah.
But it was an ode to her, and as well as an ode to the dreaded heroin. It was for both of them.
Now, I mean, you don't normally touch songs like that are, dare I say, perfect, like Golden Brown. Yet you did on one of your solo albums. You redid the song with the mariachis.
Oh yeah. Well, that wasn't on a solo album. That was just a one-off thing. Yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, I'd recently discovered the delights of Mexico and the fabulous Caribbean music that you get there, and music south of the border. And I suddenly woke up with the idea that Golden Brown would work as a mariachi song. So it was a one-off thing. It hasn't appeared on an album, but it's got millions of hits on YouTube, which is great.
Yeah, and it's a great song.
Somebody likes it.
It worked. It definitely worked. Now, just let's go fast forward to your solo career. You had the pleasure of working with Tony Visconti, who, of course, famous producer, worked with Bowie and McCartney. And I feel as an album, it really shows.
Did he work with McCartney? I didn't know that.
He did, yeah. He worked on Band on the Run. Mm.
Did he really? Did he?
Yeah.
I should have known that, shouldn't I?
Yeah. No.
But I do know that James Coburn appears on the cover of Band on the Run.
Yeah, he does. Along with a lot of other famous actors as well.
That's right. Yeah. He was making a film in the UK and took time out to, I think the something Covenant. He was making a film. I'm an expert on James Coburn at the moment because I've just done a profile of his career.
Yeah.
The cool cat Coburn. What a great guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he raised the bar of every film that he appeared in, and it's remarkable. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
No, that's okay. Look, the album has been described as being a cross between Dylan, Dire Straits, and a dash of the Travelling Wilburys for good measure.
Oh, beyond Elysium Fields, you mean?
Yes, beyond Elysian Fields.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really does show. When you go into an album like Beyond Elysian Fields, do you go into it with an idea of how you want it to sound, or is it just a blank canvas?
Well, that particular album, I really had it in my mind. I wanted to do an acoustic-y based album, not totally acoustic, but just with a lot of acoustic guitar on it. And I'd been listening to John Wesley Harding a lot at the time, and I just thought it was one of my favourite Dylan albums, probably the most favourite for the songwriting. The songwriting is so strong on it, and the arrangements are so simple. So that was a lesson in itself, just listening to it and learning from it. Yeah. So I went to Tony and sort of explained this to him, and he said, and he was in New York at the time working on a Heathen, I think. And it was at the end of the session one day at Looking Glass Studios. And he said, well, you better play me the songs. Let me have a listen to the songs. So I said, okay, well, you got a guitar? He said, yeah, we'll go next door and grab one of David's. So I went next door into the studio, and Bowie had finished for the day. And that's why Tony had slotted my meeting with him then. Yeah. And so I went in and played all the songs on one of David's acoustic guitars to Tony, and Tony recorded it.
Wow!
And I'd just been playing them all live at shows to get them up and running. So I was able to play them, without just one-off takes. And I did the whole album acoustically, and I've actually got hold of the recording. And it's called. I've got it as merchandise, and it's called Acoustic Elysian Fields, and it's played on one of David Bowers' guitars, which is quite nice. A lovely guitar to play. It was beautiful as well. It had a real magic about it. So, that's how I approach that one. But I don't normally have such a, fixed idea. I mean, that was. You're talking about 25 years ago when I made that album. So, slowly over the years, I've got to the stage now where I don't work with a producer. I work with a lot of people at Tony and Laurie Latham and Liam Watson, Steve Albini, and they're all fabulous technicians and producers. But and I learned a lot from them. But then we got to a stage when I was making Monster, the album Monster, the one before Moments of Madness for Sony, and my manager said, listen, these demos you're doing are sounding so good, I'm really averse to you re-recording them from scratch, because there's something about these that we're going to lose, if you do that. So I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said, well, why don't you try and finish them off as masters? And it came completely as a surprise to me when he said that. I went, well, okay, then, well, that's what we'll do. So with my trusted engineer, Phil Andrews, we finished them off as masters, and that's what came out. And then when it came to doing Moments of Madness, it was, well, if it works, don't fix it, So we just carried on, and this time I played live bass, which was quite nice, because I started out as a bass player, in a band with Richard Thompson when I was at school, and Richard taught me to play bass guitar first. So I'm no stranger to the bass. I can get those big blisters on the first finger, that everybody gets.
And look, a great album too. I really loved, Out of the Wilderness. What a great track, and a great track to open the album with too.
Well, it's one of the last ones actually that was written.
Oh, really? Right.
Funnily enough, it's completely. It ended up being completely switched around. The last one, Heartbreak at 7, was one of the first ones to be written. And Coming Out of the Wilderness, the first one, was one of the last to be written. It's just that it's
always the way.
That's the way it ended up being structured, as a running order. And because it's one of the last ones written, it's obvious that it's coming out from the lockdown, and the whole COVID thing, and the whole album really is a product of that period, and it turned into a very productive and fruitful time for me. I know it was not like that for a lot of people. They had terrible experiences.
I think
with
it's what
their
you
families.
made. It's what you made of it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky to have been able to use the time profitably, I guess.
Mm. Now, what inspires you to create music and sing? I mean, was there a moment in the dim dark past that you just went,
I
that's it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was when I was 3 years old. I was in the garden, singing to the flowers,
That'll do it.
and yeah, and after school or before I went to school, and after nursery, and I just loved singing,
Yeah.
and then the neighbour, then the people who lived next door, they gave me sweets, because they liked the way I sang. So I was
Right.
starting off as a professional at a very early age. And my mother would say, "Don't accept sweets from the next door neighbor." I said, "But they gave them to me because they like the way I sing." I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, but she thought it was terrible.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, it's always been there, and I don't know why. I don't know where
Mm.
it came from, but
Mm.
it's always been there. I mean, I'm not really a committed guitar player.
Mm.
I only learned to play guitar as a backup instrument
Yeah.
to accompany myself. I mean, I really think of myself chiefly as a singer,
Yeah.
and a secondary guitar player. I would never say that I was a great guitar player, but I get by
Mm.
well enough to accompany myself when I'm singing.
Mm.
You know.
Mm. Is there an artist that you, I guess, looked up to in your career?
Oh, loads. I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely loads.
That's
I
a loaded
was
question.
I was a huge fan of Mose Allison because of my brother. I shared a bedroom with my brother when we lived. One of my brothers when we were all at home,
Yeah.
and he had a record deck and a priceless. Well, to him it was priceless. Collection of vinyl records, and he
Mm.
was into jazz. And when he was away, he'd leave and he'd say, "Don't you dare touch any of my records." Of course, as soon as he left, I was putting them on and listening to them,
Of course.
being curious. And then I ran across a Mose Allison in his collection. I love Mose, and sort of not really jazz, but
Mm.
sort of jazz blues sort of thing.
Yeah.
I loved it, and so I've always been a great fan of Mose. God rest his soul. And
Yeah.
I managed to meet him once backstage at a gig of his in New Orleans when I was recording Beyond Elysian Fields, actually.
Yeah. Right.
And I was able to tell him, that what a big fan I was of his. He didn't know who I was, of course.
Yeah.
And who else? Well, I mean, Bowie's always been up there as being an enigmatic artist, with a great voice.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to work with Tony because Tony's very good with voices, and he was always very good with David's voice, putting it right up
Did
there
amazing work.
above the music,
Yeah.
and that to me has always been the secret of songwriting of a song is the song supports the voice. It's all about, I think it's the voice, and everything else must be in support of the voice.
The voice.
And Tony did that for David very well. So
Yeah.
so that's why I wanted to work with Tony. So I mean, Bowie was up there, and I mean Lou Reed and the Velvets, all that, and the Doors, all that sort of stuff is all. It's enigmatic,
Yeah.
I love things. I was very attracted to things that were enigmatic. In the same way, I was attracted to Arthur Lee, the legendary Los Angeles musician who
Yes.
proved to be such an influence on Hendrix, if anyone knows that or not. I mean, they might be surprised that Hendrix was influenced by someone. Well, I tell you what, Arthur Lee certainly influenced him. He stole a lot of things off Arthur Lee.
Right.
And Arthur had this fabulous band called Love, who made a couple of groundbreaking master classes of songwriting.
Yeah. Right.
And so, I mean, Arthur Lee was a big. And I mean, the thing is, when I'm songwriting, and I've heard Paul McCartney say this too. He said, when we write songs, me and John, we were trying to write a song like somebody that we really admired. And so you start off with that, and then you end up with your own song, And that's what I do a lot of the time. I try and I think, oh, really like to write a song like an Arthur Lee love song. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I start it, and then by the time I've finished it, it doesn't sound anything like that. It sounds like one of mine. But that's what a way to begin. It's a good excuse to start writing a song, isn't it?
It is. I mean, there really is nothing new. They're just regurgitated ideas that you've captured during your life.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, just in wrapping up, what are you listening to now? I always ask this of everyone I speak to. Like, what are you listening to on your vinyl maybe now?
I don't listen to music, Shane. I hate to divulge this, but I've got so many things going on inside my head with new ideas for stuff of my own, and also relearning old stuff for the live shows, and also lyrical ideas and literary ideas as well, because I've started writing books and film scripts as well. I've got so many things going around in my head. The last thing I want to do is clutter it up
with more music,
listening to some what somebody else has come up with. And it sounds very selfish, but that's the only way I can maintain an even keel with what I do. I used to listen to a lot of music, but I wouldn't listen. I wouldn't know where to start now. The only music I listen to is on soundtracks to films. Sometimes I'll watch a film and I'll go, oh, quite like the look of that. I'll wait till the end and see who it was, and I see who it is. And then I look it up and I find it's about 30 years old. And I'm hearing it for the first time. So, so I'm not the person to give you much interesting information about what I'm listening to.
No, I think it's amazing how many artists say the same thing. And
do they?
Yeah,
do they really say that?
They do. I was talking to Ivor Davies from Ice House, and he doesn't listen to things, but he has songs that pop into his head that he can't get rid of. And I would agree with that. That happens. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, big news, you are heading to Australia. We've got some dates that haven't been released yet. They are by the time this podcast is out, they'll have been released. But August this year, you are heading to Australia, Sydney, Blue Mountains, Brisbane, Adelaide, Melbourne, possibly Tasmania. Maybe?
Possibly Tasmania. Let's try and do it. I'll twist his arm and see if we can get something going. I mean, if you really think that people are going to show up, then I'll tell him.
Yep. And we love our music down here.
And you pass it on to the guy that arranged this. Because he's got the promoter's ear as well. I'd love to come down there. It was on my list. I said, let's go to Tasmania. I bet not many people go there.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
He said no, they don't go for a reason.
Oh, what's that? It's too cold. Oh, gee, put a jumper on. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, Hugh, and what an incredible career that you have had. Loving your new album, and of course you can find that everywhere. Have you got a website people can go to grab hold of all of your information?
Sure, yeah, just hughcornwell.com, and that's it. Everything's on there.
Fantastic.
Everything's on there.
Fantastic. Hugh, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Shane, and take care, and hopefully see you in August. Cheers.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Long Way to the Top. Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast, and head over to Facebook at the Long Way to the Top podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.